Last week, the band Heavy's the Crown, which I've done some work for previously, released their second single called INFAMY, in solidarity with all the artists, writers, and other creatives who have been overshadowed by the overuse in AI generation. And to go along with it, I made them a lyric video showcasing the themes of the song and making reference to the events going on in our world. And today, we're going to look at it as we go through the process and story of this lyric video. Let's get started. Right off the bat, completing the chanting and the choruses would eliminate most of the work that I had to do for this video. So I decided to start with those, specifically the chanting, by hopping into Blender and creating some picket signs that I wanted for this part of the song. My original plan for this lyric video was to make it look rushed out and intentionally bad, as a way to show how most animators and artists working on major motion pictures are often working insane hours and struggling to meet deadlines for the hundreds of VFX shots that these movies require. But similar to the randomness that I mentioned in the last video, making something look bad on purpose is a lot harder than you might expect, because now not only are you focused on it looking good, you're trying to make it look good enough to look bad. Does that make sense? I hope so. But while making the signs with this idea in mind, I decided to have the words actually coming off the signs, like they were too big and weren't rendered properly, or like the keyframes were messed up and had some signs stay in frame longer than they were supposed to. And it didn't look great. Like I said, I got the looking bad part down, but not the looking good to be bad part down. I still liked the idea, so I did finish this section and came back to it later, and I made the signs come up on their respective words and go down before the next ones came up. And that was it for the chanting, and that was just sprinkled throughout the song, and now it's time for the chorus. Now, often when I'm animating lyric videos, and I've done quite a lot at this point, I struggle to come up with not so much the actual imagery of the video, but rather how the imagery is going to connect back to one another, making it stylistically, air quotes, stylistically different between chorus, verse, and bridge, but finding a way to stitch them all together so they look different and you can tell the different parts of the song apart, but also that they feel like one cohesive lyric video. And this was no exception. I didn't really have a great idea on how to depict each line in the chorus, but I did know at the start of the song I wanted the camera crawling through empty city streets. So using that as a jumping off point, I started modeling some skyscrapers. Originally, I was going to put an empty movie lot to tie in more with the current events, but I opted instead to incorporate some Heavy's the Crown lore and branded the central skyscraper as Almighty Money Records, the record label that originally signed Vector and Nicole and forced them to make an album. Coming soon, hopefully. Then I went with my tried and true method for animating 3D lyric videos, and that was making each of the words scale up from 0, one at a time. But hey, it works. I also tried to use colors to separate the different sides of the conflict within the lyric video, using the voices of the people and all the creatives in a red to match the protest signs, and putting Almighty Money Records in green. And later the chorus would flip those and bathe the record company in a sinister red light. Not quite sure if it worked out as well as I intended it to, but I still like how it came out. While I had abandoned the idea to make the music video look rushed out, I still didn't have all the time in the world to make this thing. And I knew for the next part that I wanted the chorus to be in the CEO office of Almighty Money Records, like right above the neon sign that's on the building. And it just so happens that I already made a CEO looking office for when I did the lyric video for Dead on Renewal from the Nightmare Before World College Radio Day for my thesis project. So I took that entire office and just appended it into this new Blender project. And now I know what you're thinking, and no, I didn't just use the same exact office verbatim. I rearranged some furniture around to make it look a little different. I also knocked down one of the walls entirely and replaced it with glass panes to make it match the outside of the skyscraper as seen in the shot before. Then I added a literal sun shining into the windows for the next part of the lyrics and had them coming up from the street view. And it looked pretty cool. But then I decided to play around with the sun color and making it transition from a white to a deep orange, and that just took it from cool to hot. For the final lines of this part of the chorus, I used the couple of point lights that I used to rim light the desk in the same orange color, and used those to cast a shadow of the next words onto the ceiling for no other reason than I thought it looked kind of cool. I'm running out of adjectives. On to the next part. Now, you would think I would move on to the next part of the chorus chronologically, that being part 3, but no, for some reason I decided to go with the final part of the chorus rather than the next part. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe I had a more thought out idea for this part of it, but it was like a week ago, so I can't actually remember. But as I mentioned before, this is the part of the chorus where the colors flip and the green of Almighty Money Records turns into the red of the infamy that they live in. I made an empty room by creating a plane and extruding the walls up, which, now that I think about it, I probably could have just made a cube and deleted one face rather than starting with one face and adding 4 additional ones. Oops, live and learn. Luckily though, I duplicated everything in the scene and just flipped it 180 once I was done with it to create the second part, so I didn't have to do it twice. But I modeled the throne in my new, overcomplicatedly built room and put that thing in the dead center, lit only by a single spotlight with the faintest hint of green to show how the perceived good of Almighty Money Records was fading before it completely transitions into the red light directly underneath it. And it was with these last 2 scenes that I made that I actually struggled to come up with what I wanted to use for the thumbnail. So I went with both. Then it was time to move on to the third part of the chorus, because that's how counting works. Fortunately, I decided to do each part of the chorus and everything 3D modeled within its own scene in Blender, so there was nothing I had to roughly shoehorn in until later on when I was just cutting them at the correct points back in After Effects. I opted for a more grounded scene like parts 1 and 2 of the chorus rather than the more symbolic scene that the throne room has in part 4. I modeled a single cubicle and then used the array modifier, or as I like to call it, a godsend, to make an entire factory line of cubicles, each one equipped with the same monitor and chair that I stole from that CEO office from earlier. And since they were all taking information from the same material layer, I was able to make each one of them show the exact same image, which I changed between the intro of the song and the chorus of the song. It was also here that I was playing with the wording texture that I wound up creating this sort of static effect on each of the words that I thought really fit with this part of the chorus. When I normally am making lyric videos, usually in After Effects, I would complete the chorus once, smush it all into one composition, and then just copy and paste it in every instance of the chorus in the song, changing timing if needed. For Infamy, however, each of the choruses had a bit different wording to them, so I took this slightly longer path of individually animating each part of the chorus in the song within its own respective scene. By which I mean I copy and rearrange the keyframes from one chorus to another. And I say the slightly longer route, but that's only if you don't count the rendering time of what was at this point 5 separate 3D scenes. Whatever, not really a big deal. If you forget about the part where it's 5 renders of a nearly 4-minute song, which is about 5,700 frames, which at this point totaled to about 28,500 frames of rendering, and that's not counting the botched renders and going back to make changes. So yeah, this project took a lot of waiting just so I can make sure that when everything went into After Effects, I could easily line everything up. But that's okay. I finished a couple books and got to binge a lot of Let's Game It Out until each scene was done. True story. Not only did the chorus knock out a majority of the song that needed to be done, but since the bridge was similar to the chorus, that one was about halfway done as well. To round off the bridge, I animated some glowing demon eyes on the changed lyrics in the second line, and then for lines 3 and 4, I started implementing this secondary, somewhat meta storyline of the lyric video. That the animator of this lyric video, me, didn't have enough time to fully complete it before the song was released. It was very similar to the idea I had at the start, where I wanted it to look bad and rushed on purpose to show what animators in the industry have to go through, but instead decided to showcase the grueling hours and tight deadlines by incorporating aspects of the creative process into the lyric video itself, something you'll see more as we go forward. For the next portions of the bridge, I decided to fake some storyboards and animation tests for the lyrics of the bridge, implying that the animator, once again me, couldn't animate these sections, so the band just threw in my storyboards into the final render, which I put a time code at top, a not for final use at the bottom to really sell that effect. I loved how it turned out, and it was this part of the song that actually influenced what I would do for the verses. I'm not good at planning when it comes to art projects, especially longer videos. As I just said, for the bridge, I faked storyboards because I didn't actually have any. I didn't even have an animatic to reference when making this video. I had a few sketches that I did that's like, well, I want this scene to mainly look like this one to look like this, and I'll figure out the rest. I just don't work much in a planning phase, and as a result, I got to this part of the song where I had no idea what I was going to do to visually represent the verses. But as I mentioned, the storyboard and this storyline that I did of it wasn't completed in time made itself present in what I was going to do for the verses. Because when the song was released, the WGA had been on strike for about 2 months, protesting for better pay and working conditions, I wanted to highlight some of the hard work that went into the creative process. For the first verse, I formatted it to look like a script using action lines as flavor text to make it more authentic and give the idea that the video for Infamy was supposed to originally have some live action components to it. And to show that a person was writing the script rather than a generative machine, I made the lyrics fade onto the page in this sort of inky effect that made it look like a person's ideas were manifesting itself onto the paper, rather than having each of the words be typed out left to right, which would have made it feel more mechanic. I also gave it a paper texture and added a spotlight on it to just make it look a little more pretty. And for verse 2, believe it or not, it was already time for the project to be released, despite this section of the song falling in between the scripting and the storyboarding phases in the first verse and the bridge respectively. And so the video hit theaters, the lines in the next verse playing to rows of empty seats on a generic, default, nondescript red background, until the credits roll and the post-credit scene promises the inevitable next installment of this song. Modeling the theater was easy because I didn't model it. I actually made the smart decision of copying the throne room from the chorus and just pasting it into its own scene. I then started extruding and de-extruding the walls. I don't know what the line for it would be, but I made some parts of the wall come forward and other parts of the wall go back. So I don't know if I could use the same word for both of them. But I did that. And then modeling the chairs was also easy since we were looking at the back of them. I didn't have to worry about seating or arms, so I just made a cube, gave it a little hump, and just arrayed the hell out of it. It's not cutting corners if no one's going to see it. I barely had time to finish this scene though, and barely had time to correct the spelling errors, because before you knew it, the video is now up on streaming services. Right up there next to the new and unpopular and the soulless remake section. I actually went ahead and launched my own completely original streaming service for this part because, well, come on, if you don't have a streaming service of your own nowadays, what are you doing? I added some projects that I already had to beef up the catalog on launch day, and a new documentary that we just finished shooting about the Heavy is the Crown project. I even animated a carousel so the different shows would cycle through and the banner would change as it did so, which I thought looked really nice. Now, during this entire process while I was trying to finish the lyric video, I heard through the grapevine that the people I hired to run my new original streaming service wanted to use generative AI to increase the number of shows on the platform. And I wasn't going to let that happen, so I quickly learned web design to make a fake AI generator website, though I didn't really try to hide the fake part of it, and watched as they used it to no beneficial result to them. And then, to rub a little salt in the wound, I added their little mishap to fill out the guitar solo section of our song here. And with that, infamy lives on. Then I went with my tried and true method. Tried and true. My tried and true method for animated 3D lyric video. Fortunately though, I decided to do each one of these in its own thing. Kind of like not each different Blender files, but different projects within the same main file. If that makes sense. I don't know. There's a little thing where you can just make separate scenes. So I guess they're called scenes. Influenced what I would do for the verses. Verses is so weird. Because it's a part of the song, but like, if you say it plural, it's like the verses. It's going. And this is what I did for the verses. It's just a bunch of songs fighting each other, like verses. I'm very hungry. I gotta say, this is probably my favorite lyric video that I've ever made. I love how I chose to visually represent each of the different parts of the song, and I love how everything came together in the final product. And I love the song too, and the links for the song will be down in the description below, and the lyric video will be up here. And so if you need to find the song, readily available for you. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you had fun, feel free to like the video. I would try to get an AI to do it, but last time I tried to get a machine to like something, it just gave me recommendations for ice cream shops. So really not effective at all. And your likes mean a lot more than any machine ever could. I appreciate all of you for being around and watching this stuff. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you again, everyone. I'm KyngPin Creations, and I'll see you all next time. Take care, everybody.